team.
Hey there, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactical Team. We're going to be coming back to part of the Dark Elves book, mainly because I screwed it up. Reading through this, there's a few things I made some assumptions on, a few things that are worded very oddly, and basically I kind of screwed up some of the rules in one of my games. So I thought, hey, if I mess this up, let's come back and really refocus on this unit, and it's the Cauldron of Blood. Now, the Cauldron of Blood is kind of something that's very interesting. Obviously, before it give you all those different benefits, you could get Killing Blow and all these things, but it operates very differently now. And it's one of these things where when you look at it, and it's like, okay, it's a mount for something. It's going to be operating outside. You start making these assumptions, and then all of a sudden you saw you got to join units and all this. But let's really get to the real meat of this. One of the biggest things that it has is that it can actually join units, like I was saying. Now, I really thought that this was a key thing because it was a character, right? You don't just take it normally anymore. You have to take it as part of the Death Egg. It's basically a mount for it. Now, I kind of thought this worked kind of like the Tomb Kings, where if you kill, something with the character on it, all of a sudden it can't join anymore. That chariot have to move away. There's very few things that work like this, and I thought this might be one of them. Well, no. Actually, the Cauldron of Blood has this Will of the Gods rule, so it can actually join units as if it was a character. So it's much like the Skaven things, either the Bell or the Furnace, where you can kill the character all you want, it's not going to leave the unit. And that kind of really helps it, and, well, in a way, kind of hinders it too, but we're going to get to that in a second. Now, the next thing that's kind of weird, the way that they kind of wrote this here, is it has a strength of Cain. Now, friendly models with the murderous prowess special rule in units within 6 inches of the Cauldron of Blood reroll all failed to wound rolls. Now, I first thought, looking at this, that okay, if you're within 6 inches, those models get to do this. But really, no, if the unit is within 6 inches, then models in that unit with that rule get to re-roll their wounds. So this is a much easier mechanic. I compared it before to the whole Thunder Tusk or whatever it's called, where you have to always measure the 6 inches, and it's a real pain. So I'm really happy to see you don't need to do that. At the same time, this is something that has brought up a little bit of controversy, and it'll be interesting to see which way this goes. Now, what this really comes from here is that if you read the Murderous Prowess rule, you get to reroll ones in combat, and that's really cool. It's a bonus. Why not? This one here says you get to reroll all your failed to wound rolls. That's even better. However, there's a very key little component that's missing from here, which says in combat. So basically what this can really say is if you got those friendly models in there, you can be re-rolling your wounds for shooting, for magic, whatever, right? If you're rolling to wound rolls and you have the Murderous Prowess special rule and you're within 6 of the Cauldron, you get to re-roll this stuff. Now, this comes down to a whole thing of rules as written, rules as intended, and it was something like this. Obviously, clearly looking at it, rules as written, you do get to re-roll this stuff. So if you have this within 6 inches of a unit of crossbowmen, sure, strength 3 is almost nothing. You get to start re-rolling those strength 3 shots. It's pretty dang good. The other thing too, right? Some of the things like we were laughing at the whole attribute of the lore, where, oh, okay, you get some extra strength 1 hits. Oh, that's nothing. Well, if nothing else, you've got that sorceress that's by there. You're casting Doom Bolt. You're going to be re-rolling those 2 wounds. And then if you get anything through this, if you had doubles, you got an extra, 2d6 strength 1 hits, whatever it is, you're re-rolling those as well. And that makes it a lot more viable because it's then multi-purpose. It's not just for combat, it's for everything. And I think this could really help out the whole shooting army idea, where normally you wouldn't just take a gun line, you need to have some combat elements in there. So what you could do is sit back, boost all your shooting, and then send in the guys after. So this can really help out a lot. Now, like I said, there's some controversy here, and some people are saying, well, rules as intended. It should really say there that it's just for combat. I'm sure it's going to be FAQ'd. Honestly, with this one, I'm not really sure if it is going to be FAQ. Who really knows, right? I don't work for GW. I'm sure most of the people that listen to me don't work for GW. So as far as rules as attended goes, if nothing else, maybe double check with your TO. But I know if I was running a tournament and this wasn't answered yet, I would say, no, you get to re-roll all this stuff. So looking at this becomes a very, very nice utility piece. Like I said, where you can now, whereas I thought before, you can't really have it behind the unit because the 6 inches could really throw you off. Well, no, now it's just like the Hurricanum or anything else where you can be, back 6 inches and keeping it just fine and safe. Now, this is a good amount of points. This isn't just cheap and you just kind of throw it around. You're coming a little under 300 points, so it's a pretty big investment. And one of the things you have to always ask yourself is if it's going to be really worth that. Because, as nice of a bonus is to getting all those re-rolls, and you can get a little bit of synergy too if you have it inside the unit. You can give the Death Hag the Witch Brew, and then she can give the unit Frenzy and all these things, or Super Frenzy if they already have it. But, this is a lot of points. And once you start getting that stuff and putting any other gear on her, she starts going over 300 points. One of the things you can also wonder about here too is whether it's better to put it inside or outside of the unit. Now, other things don't have a choice. If we're talking about the Skaven things like the furnace or the bell, it has to be in a unit. So there's no question there. It can't even move if the unit's killed around it. This thing can operate around by itself. Now, why would you want to put it inside the unit? Well, maybe if there's a lot of shooting that you're worried about, sure, you could try and hide it from there. But for the most part, there's not really a lot of shooting that's really going to threaten this thing. I mean, it has, kind of a weak innate save on it. It's going to be having its own 4+ ward save. That's pretty nice. It also has a pretty high toughness. I mean, sure, any shots that are going to randomize onto the Death Hag, that's not going to be good news. But I think the biggest thing to look at here is that a lot of things that are really going to threaten you are going to be the things like the cannons and also the stone throwers. And if these are going after the Cauldron, it doesn't really matter whether it's in a unit or not, because a chariot in a unit of infantry is just not going to be getting that look out, sir. And then she's going to get cranked in the face and die. It's one of these things here too where, you got that 4+ ward and that's all great, but it could be a thing where, okay, my Cauldron lived, but now my Death Hag died. And, that might not be a big thing that you care about, because until the Cauldron dies as well, you don't lose any points. It's still giving re-rolls to things within 6 inches of it, but then there's still those other little bonuses that are going to be mainly if it's part of a unit. If it's part of a unit and it's going to be giving out that Super Frenzy, well, then all of a sudden that could be an issue. Anything else that, her extra attacks are going to be gone. And something else with this too that really hurts the Death Hag is the fact that she can only take magical weapons. So when you're toughness 3 and absolutely naked, that's kind of a big deal. She also doesn't have a super weapon skill. It's only 6. If it was 7, then at least anything that's weapon skill 3 is hitting her on 5s. I mean, you can go with the whole war cry thing and hope that they're going to fail their fear test on the -3, and then they're hitting her on 5s anyway. But I mean, there's no way to get her a better armor save. She gets the ward save from the Cauldron, but that's really it. I mean, really the only thing you can do to make her more defensive is give her Defensor Blades. That's not too many more points. Remember, she's already, almost 300, and if you're giving her these different, War Cry and stuff and the Defensor Blades, we're now over 300 points, so it's getting a pretty big dedication. And even then, that's not going to really change the math a whole lot, because if this is in a unit and getting into combat, they can put a lot of attacks onto her and kill her. Now, one of the things I was starting to think of after this fact is, what? Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Because, well, let's look at it this way. If you have this Death Hag, you can just say like, oh, this is my naked Death Hag, haha, she's in the Cauldron, we're going to do combat. You'll get in there, they'll put all attacks into her, just like I did in my first game, and it's going to take a lot of attacks, you're going to kill her, but you're not going to be getting that much combat res, and you're not really changing anything. You know, killing her doesn't really change too much. Sure, her attacks will be missing, but that's about it. In the meanwhile, everything else that's in the unit that's getting all those rerolls and stuff is blundering the hell out of you and slaughtering you. Now, of course, one of the things that's kind of in question here is how wide is the combat? Because if you're just a narrow frontage, that Cauldron takes up a big chunk of the unit, and there's not much other stuff that is fighting. But definitely when you get a lot bigger, especially when we're talking about horde on horde, you know, the chariot is not taking up that many attacks away, and you're getting a lot of attacks from everything else. So the more that they dedicate to trying to kill this death hag, that really isn't giving that much, really takes away from what's going after the other stuff, which is really getting a lot of attacks, and what's really going to be weighing their combats for them turn after turn after turn. So now looking at this and putting it all together, you know, depending on how it is, whether, you know, what you're up against, the frontage and stuff, I am starting to really warm up to the Cauldron of Blood. At first, I thought it was something that was, you know, it's nice, but it's fairly expensive. But especially if it's not FAQ'd to be just to combat, I think it could be something that's very worth it. Like I said, you start off the game, you're in the back, and it's going to be making sure it's within 6 inches of your shooting units. Now, keep in mind that things like the repeater bolt thrower, the bolt thrower doesn't actually have the murderous prowess, so you wouldn't get to re-roll those to wound. Because it's not actually like the crew, it's actually the weapon, as far as I understand it. So it's mainly going to be your other things, mainly your crossbowmen. So standing back with that, lots of shooting. Your magical bunker is going to be back there, slinging out spells, re-rolling those to wounds. And then when it actually comes to actual combat, great. Now you can go up and support. Whether it's in the unit and fighting in combat or not, you know, it's really adding its weight. What it's really going to come down to then is it adding 300 points of power to your unit. Especially look at combat, right? Where it's going to be taking up all that room in there. You got to remember that could all be, you know, more witches, more corsairs. You could be getting a lot of attacks there. So is it really worth those extra attacks when you could be getting those in there? Again, it really depends on the frontage. Or, you know, with those 300 points, am I better just getting 2 monsters? You know, why don't I just add in 2 Charybdis, right? And something like this. You have to really do that careful balance and see what you're actually getting out of it. Or am I up against a very shooty opponent, and you know what? It's just going to be killing my Cauldron no matter what, right? If you're seeing that, you know what? You're better off spending those 300 points on killy characters that can safely hide inside the units. So it's really going to depend on the point size, your meta, what you're facing, and the frontages and all this. But definitely now I have warmed up to the Cauldron of Blood, especially after seeing how deadly it is. And just thought I should do this revisit of a video. So thanks for watching. Bye.